And so the thrust of this podcast is that this is producer-based hip-hop content conversation. So maybe we'll keep the name, maybe we will ditch the name. But speaking of names, Andrew, this is what I wanted you to tell the people, because there's something called 4D2D. What or who is 4D2D? I want to hear your version of this story. What is 4D2D?
4D2D stands for $4, 2 dimes, which is weed slang for 420. I don't know if we came up with it together or if you came up with it. I don't recall who originally came up with the idea, but I always loved that it's like rappers have the name of their artist name, their label, then the acronym for their label, and then the slang for their label, and so they could shout out these things in all of their raps. Taylor Gang, like Wiz Khalifa always had some funny way to say Taylor Gang in all of his raps, and that's what I liked about saying $4 to dimes, 4D2D, PIKE, vDIME, like having all these things we could shout out. That was this conglomerate. They all came back to the same thing. That was our group.
Okay, so
label.
I'm glad you said that, because at the beginning, I mean, I think I was 18 years old, so long time ago. I actually remember being in my parents' dining room. I have this really specific memory of, I don't know if we were both there, but I think that's when I think I came up with the name. And it's like this weird double meaning, like $4, 2 dimes. We're rapping for money to women or something like that was this other double meaning. But then it's like, oh, 420, oh, it's weed because we love weed. So that we thought we were very clever with that one, of course.
I still think it's pretty clever.
It also said yeah,
I know my mom tried to, when I was starting like a professional business, they're like, oh, you gotta, it's gotta mean something. Don't tell people it means weed. So she was trying to think of what else the acronym could be. $4 for donuts.
Oh my
because
goodness.
that's apparently a phrase about something that I've I've heard it like once or twice, but he was trying to help come up with a different thing. I was like, no, it's whatever. Nobody asks what 4D2D is anyway,
so
rarely.
At the beginning, it wasn't really a company yet. It was our group. It was our band. We were rapping and making beats together. Although, of course, that kind of fizzled out at some point. We made 2 albums. The first one was Dollar Menu.
The Dollar Menu.
There's some crazy shit on
which
there.
doesn't exist anywhere except for like a CD in my car and some hard drives.
Yeah, I've got a super scratched up CD somewhere in Michigan, probably, but.
And there are several people in Grand Rapids that may still have it.
And then we did.
That we probably only burned like 10 copies.
I need to stop touching my face. Then we did The Architects with the homie Scott Block. So that was our second release. It's funny to me to call them releases, but that also exists somewhere.
That actually lives online. That is all on YouTube. I believe that was before streaming services became a big thing. So it's not on Spotify. It is on YouTube. I did one. That was when I was trying to be a rapper and playing shows. I did burn like 30 copies and gave them out on 16th Street Mall.
Yeah, so, I remember that.
There are probably albums floating around somewhere.
Yeah. So this was kind of the problem, because I wasn't super excited about doing shows. I mean, I love writing raps and recording them, but I kind of hit a wall when it came to performing. So then you actually created a company called 42D Productions. And so
LLC. I went
now this
legit.
is your production company. At one point, I was your employee in like 2000, what, like 14 or something? How did that work?
Yeah, before I knew what I was really doing, I tried to be legit and sign you to I don't know, a publishing
Yeah.
contract, I think was probably what you'd call it. The You'd send me beats and I would try my best to sell them. I did land I did land a pretty cool
Yeah. Yeah,
thing
you landed a
on a CD for an author, Danielle Laporte.
yeah.
She liked the name of your beat. It was called No Fucks Given. And through Sounds True, I gave it to Drummond to use in a video, and he sent it to her, and she's like, I think she just loved the
Really?
name and loved the beat, yeah, and then bought it
Wow.
exclusive.
Yeah, and that was big time money at the time.
That was a decent
I think
check back
I
then.
think to this day that's probably the most money I've made with music, which is kind of sad, but I haven't really been going hard like you have.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Speaking of which,
Speaking
yeah,
of,
that's a good
yeah,
transition.
making money with
You
music,
recently,
our uh our intro theme, what we want to do each week is each of us will produce a different intro beat, and then talk about how it was made. So today's beat is one of mine. I believe it's called Slam
mm,
Dunk, um, originally. So I will say this was for a sync library, and it was actually originally for a Taco Bell
mm,
commercial based on one of their. They'd say, "Hey, we need songs like X, Y, and Z," and one of them was a, I don't know, hip hop, rap, lots of horns, upbeat sports kind
mm,
of beat. And I made that wasn't too long ago. It was a couple months ago. But it lives in this library and they shop it along. And 2 weeks ago, I got an email that said, "Hey, a client likes this. Can you send us the stems?" And luckily, I saw the email right away and I sent them the stems in like 30 minutes. And sat and waited. And the next week, they said, "Hey, congratulations. It's going to be in a commercial or an ad for QuickBooks and MailChimp." And there was a large check
mm.
attached to it. And I was very excited. And I said, send it to me when it's live. I didn't expect it to be live. I think it dropped that day I got the email that it was placed. And I didn't find it till a couple days later. And the ad stars DJ Khalid and a talking cat.
That to me is to
That
me
was
is the
awesome.
coolest part. I mean, QuickBooks. Uh, I mean, at the end of the day, we're hip hop guys. So to see a super celebrity like DJ Khaled, just in a commercial with your beat is pretty surreal, and
Thank you.
I'm proud of you, man.
Thank you.
What can I say?
Yeah.
It's super cool. I do want to. Let's talk about your history, because when I met you, really we went to high school together first of all, and we really started hanging out because of the music. And when you went to college, if I recall, you were making beats on a program called
Magix with an
Magix,
X.
and you had a little shitty
Yes, a
microphone.
terrible USB
It was so
microphone.
bad.
Yeah.
But and you were recording, you were making beats and recording songs, and I remember like the first couple that I heard. I think you did one, maybe it was one on like on a Chronic beat, Chronic
Yeah.
2001.
That was like one of the first songs. Plastic Gats is what it was called.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Oh my god. That song was so sick. And
It's
I
about a Nerf
and
gun.
when you played
Yeah.
that for me, I was yeah, and I was like, that's you? Holy shit.
That
I was
was
blown
probably one of the
away.
first songs I ever recorded, now that I think about it.
Yeah. So then just tell me about your progression from then until now. Like you obviously don't use Magics anymore.
No, I will say starting when I started off, the couple things that I didn't know, one of the things was buffer size. So if I get famous and somebody wants to hear all this old stuff on my hard drive and it leaks, you'll notice that all of my raps are behind the beat because I didn't know what a buffer size
Hmm.
was. So it was set really high and probably in Magic, so all of my vocals were a little behind. So now when you record, you want to set it low enough that there's no gap, like your vocals are immediate on the beat when you're recording, but not too low that you get artifacts. And then the other thing I didn't know was
Oh,
when you export the bit depth and sample rate, because every once in a while I'd accidentally export a song that sounded like shit, and I'd be like, "What? I don't know," because I probably exported it
yeah.
at 32 bit something terrible or something. Um, so those are the 2 things that looking back now, I'd go, "Oh, yeah," but I wasn't in school. I was literally I know how this microphone hooks up, and I know how to take in samples. I didn't know what MIDI was. I couldn't get my MIDI keyboard to work. So literally all of my first beats were literally, "Oh, I like this bass note. I need a bass. I gotta find a bass note from a record. I need drums. I need a sample." Like, it was
Yeah.
everything was sampled together from, like, 5 places.
And it was super tedious, right? Because I when I started, I was just using GarageBand on my Mac laptop, and I've never been good at like composing, so it was always sample everything, sample every drum sound,
Yep.
typically. Although they had a lot of nice cymbals and toms, so you remember my old GarageBand beats had a shitload of crazy like Just Blaze
Yeah.
drum shit
They're
going
pretty,
on. But
the
like,
vDIME beat, I don't know, signature was tiny, tiny chops, like the smallest
yeah,
possible.
yeah,
You can sample anything. You probably sample Michael Jackson and the Beatles and get away with it because you're using the
yeah.
tiniest little slices and just do, 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 do. Very
The
Swiss beats kind of.
it was basic. What I was really doing, if you think about it now, like I was kind of like creating almost like a
Yeah,
simpler, where like creating instrument with just these. It's almost like textures, or just the sounds. And but the reason I was doing that was because one, I didn't like kind of just looping up samples. I thought that was like cheating. But also, I didn't have a lot of
yeah.
stuff to sample. So, and any song that I heard, I was like, I'm gonna sample it,
Somehow.
even if there's nothing in. It's like a 5 second clip, so it's like, how can I make
Yeah.
this into a beat?
I know
But you were
that's where
doing
we
that too.
differ because I do love, oh, that verse, that 30 seconds of that beat, sweet, let's just add drums to it.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I definitely do
yeah,
that more
that
now,
was
but
our when we were
at
starting
the
out, our different styles, and that was more, I
yeah,
think, more just because of my limitations with my software. I didn't really know how to chop it up and then play it. I just had to like drag and drop and copy and paste. So it was much easier to be like, all right, this 10 seconds, I like this 10 seconds, loop, 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 rather than
yeah,
making all these little chops and moving them into place. And um,
right. I gotta say though, doing that, well, in Magix, I'm sure it was so tedious, and in GarageBand, it was super tedious. And going back and listening to some of those beats, I can't believe, like, because I'm not the hardest working guy, so I can't believe I put in the work to make some of those. And then at some point, like 7 years later, I think you hooked me up with Ableton, and that was already in Denver. I mean, we were
yeah,
deep in it at that point. I mean, like for the Architects, some of those beats I think at least one of them I made on GarageBand, but and that was 2012. Um, but you went from Magix to Pro Tools because you were using that in school, right?
yeah, I think that was I was using Magix when I was at Grand Valley. And um, yeah, and then when I moved out here, the first class, audio production 1, you had to get Pro Tools because that was the standard. So yeah, that was probably a huge jump in
Yeah.
technical things. I mean, I'm sure Magic's probably did a lot of the stuff. I just had no idea how to do it. Well, no knock
Yeah.
to Magic's. I'm
I've
sure it was
never.
probably a pretty good DAW, but I just had no idea what a DAW was and what MIDI was and
Yeah.
how to play keyboards and literally everything about music
Mhm.
production. I had no idea. And this was also pre YouTube days, or maybe just like the beginning of YouTube. So it's not like you could just hop online and how to make beats in Magic. Like that didn't really exist,
Right.
or if it did, we didn't know how to find it. So we are self-taught mostly. Yeah,
Oh, 100%.
trial and
100%. I
error.
mean, the sampling on GarageBand, it was crazy. And I would use Audacity also to like pitch
Yeah,
shift my samples because you had to get the Kanye
high
West,
pitched stuff. Yeah,
you know, fast, I loved I wouldn't do soul samples, but I think you gave me like a 80s metal ballads CD and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is perfect
I
because
still want to. I
most of those
still want to
songs are
flip some of those because sometimes I do have a couple of
oh yeah.
those where it's like I started a beat and I can make it so much better now. But I've been thinking about that. There's a couple
Oh
of
yeah.
those hair metal 80s, especially the love songs, just epic
Yeah.
guitars,
Cuz they're
slow,
usually
and
slow
there's an intro and an
and you can
outro
speed
without
them up.
drums, and yeah, those were good stuff.
Yeah. I still actually kind of believe like if I don't manipulate the samples like velocity or pitch or whatever, if I don't transpose it,
Yeah,
I'm not I'm not
yeah,
really flipping it. It's not really a flip. It doesn't count. I still have that inside of me, so I try to at least transpose like one, at least one
yeah.
level, I guess. Um, Now, but you also, at some point, you started using Ableton also. So, what is it now? Are you using Ableton more? Do you still use Pro Tools? How does that
Oh,
work?
I gave up Pro Tools a long time ago. Um, when we were yeah, when we were living together, I believe, I was still using Pro Tools, and it was just hard to make beats in it. Um, if you see a
Yeah.
lot of producers now that use it, they actually a lot of them use something else and then print their stems into Pro Tools because it's great for mixing and
Hmm.
arranging. Um, but what you always had to do was they've changed this terminology, but it used to be Pro Tools was the master and Ableton was the slave. And so you or Reason, if I think I used Reason for a hot second, and you'd go in there
Mm,
and because that was easier to use samples and play MIDI, and then you would mix down the stems into Pro Tools and then mix it together.
yeah.
So yeah, I made that switch, yeah, when we were living together, so like 20 um right before I met Jackie, 2012,
Yeah.
13.
Yeah. I actually remember when I got Ableton because that was right after the apartment flooded, I think. And I had this Marie Osmond CD and I have a ton of beats on my old SoundCloud with Marie Osmond samples, which kind of like what you said. I wish I should probably go back and flip them again because I think those
Yeah,
samples are sick. But it's interesting that you mentioned Reason because I think our buddy Scott Block and maybe
yeah.
shout out Jake B
They gave
Nimble.
us like
I think he had
CD,
Reason.
a bootleg CD of it. I think we had a bootleg copy that we
Yeah,
both had for a while.
and Scott he had Machine for a bit, and I think he also had an MPC. I know that you've got some hardware at your studio now. What's your position on software versus hardware? Have you done much on like Machine or any of these like sort of beat
I
machines?
haven't. I had I jam with a guy out here, Fourth Eye, and he has an MPC, and he was kind of showing me how it works. Um, and I mean, it's awesome. It's a lot of fun, but I think it's just I don't know, old dog, new tricks, kind of at this moment. I'm so quick
Yeah,
and fast in Ableton. As much as I'd love to go get an MPC or a SP404 or whatever, it's just the learning curve of going back and trying to do it. I mean, it's the same
yeah,
with like some of the hardware. Like all the hardware that I have now is synths. So that's pretty. I need a new sound. I'll just go play it on the Korg or whatever. And that's not a huge learning curve because I'm recording it into Ableton. But if it was a standalone thing, I would love if Ableton ever makes the push as a standalone thing, I'm gonna get that. I don't know
mm,
if it was a April Fool's thing or if it's actually in the works or it's a fake rumor. Um, but they're possibly talking about doing that. If that ever comes out, I'll get that just because it's integrated into Ableton. It's not as huge of a learning curve. Um, I think it's just, time and energy and money, to make
yeah,
that switch
yeah,
isn't
exactly.
everything.
I think for me, I kind of want an MPC just because I kind of like that the history and the
Yeah.
sound and the style, but it's a lot of money, and like you said, you got to really figure out how to use it. The other thing that I really want is I would love to get like a scratching turntable. That would be sick. So once I get
Yeah.
fucking rich, I might start doing that. Shall we introduce Jam Young? Jam, are you there?
I am. How are
What's
y'all
up,
doing?
buddy?
What's
We're
up,
good,
man? Long
man.
time no see.
Jam, this is actually our first time talking in real life.
Well,
We've
yeah,
uh, we've chatted here and there on the
convenience.
internet, but it's a pleasure to meet you. So my thought was I'm just gonna get to know you a little bit uh,
Yeah,
before
absolutely.
we start talking about the album. So, Jam Young, where are you from, my friend?
Always repping Queens, New York, to the point people still think I live in Queens, New York.
Where do you
uh,
live now?
I live in the city, so I'm still in New York. But just moving on up. A dream of mine always, to live in the city, and I visit Queens probably like once or twice a week. So home is literally right over the water. So
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, man, it's great. I love
Now,
I love the duality of it.
when you say the city, are you talking about Manhattan?
Yeah, yeah. So sorry, yeah. So New York slang,
Yeah,
we call that the city, no matter where we from. Like I know
sure.
people outside New York call like the whole New York City the city, but when you're from New York, you definitely call it you definitely call it the city.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you being shouting out your borough is like real important out here. So that's how they
Yeah,
know if you actually from out here or not. So they're like, "Oh, you from New York?" They'll be like, "Yeah, where you from?" If you say some weird response, that people gonna people gonna know, "Oh, you didn't grow up here."
right. I think
All
if you're not from New York, like if you listen to hip hop, you're familiar with the whole borough thing. It's pretty prevalent. So, do you have a favorite rapper of all time from Queens?
Shit. From Queens, I mean, I would probably say if from Queens specifically, it would probably be uh Nas. I mean, he might be the best MC, or arguably like
period.
lyrically, why, yeah,
Yeah.
of all time. But um, I mean, I got a lot of connections to Brooklyn, so actually, I would say Jay Z
Mm.
and Eminem are probably a little more like my actual personal favorite. Um, and I'd put J. Cole up there too. I mean, he has a lot of
Oh,
Queens connections, so he's not really like, I don't know, he's not really related in Queens, but he gets a lot of love from the hometown.
interesting. Andrew, or sorry, Pike. Who's your favorite rapper from Grand Rapids, our hometown?
I can only think of one. So, Willie the Kid.
Yeah, yeah. There's only one. Well, it's either Willie or his brother, Law the Dark Man. I mean, I don't know any others. So shout out Willie the Kid. He's making a lot
I
of
mean, yeah,
sweet music
there are
right now.
others, but yeah, on that level, no. Yeah,
Right.
It's Willie the Kid. So,
Well,
we
I
don't
had
we don't
no
have
idea that
quite
Willie the
the
Kid was from there.
yeah, we don't have the depth of artists, the well to choose from
Right.
as you do in Queens or just New York in general.
What
Yeah.
about
I
I'm
mean,
sure
Denver? I
Detroit.
mean,
all of my top 10 is probably from New York. So
Jam, you're a rapper extraordinaire, rapper, singer, songwriter, artist. When did you start doing all this stuff? How long have you been doing this?
Oh man. Well, my dad was a DJ, and my mom played music always, like, on Saturdays when we were cleaning the house. She would always be playing, like, it wasn't hip hop, but a lot of the music was always around. And when I kind of started falling in love with it when I was like 9, I really started falling in love with, like, just like entertaining, um and just like the words of it. Even though at 9 years
Mm,
old you don't really understand lyrics, like the depth of it, but the way it sounded and the emotion that hip hop inflected compared to like other genres really like spoke to me as a kid. So when I was 10, I mean, I started trying to turn it. I started writing poetry, and I kind of flipped that into
mm.
lyrics over time. Actually, the first time I ever recorded something was I mean, I don't know if kids out there are gonna know cassette tapes and stuff, but I had a cassette player, and I put the like a blank CD, a blank tape in there while my Xbox was playing Purple Hills instrumental in the background, and I just recorded like my first, like, record of on that. Um, and ever
Wow.
since then, man, I just really like I loved it. Like, something I just thought using words was so powerful, and it had such an impact on me. So I wanted to kind of like not just only share my story, but like relate to other people that felt the same way.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, it started super young. I would say though, I didn't take it like I always wanted to take it serious. Like, my dream was always like, yo, I want to be a rapper. Like, I was like, I know I can be a rapper. I want to be there. But I was the type of person in high school and as a kid, I would do everything, bro. Like, I wanted to try everything at least once. So I would do like all these sports, all these like things that like took away from my time, but on my personal time, like if I wasn't like hanging out with girls or playing basketball or doing stuff, like I would always be writing. Always.
Yeah.
They used to make fun of me because back in the day when you had to make your like voice, you had to make your voicemail, right? You could put anything on your voicemail. Like, I would start rapping over like, I think the one I got the most attention was "Beautiful" by Snoop Dogg. I rapped
Okay.
over that, and so when people called me and I didn't pick up, that would be they would hear like a 30, like 30 bars of just like over that. So, um,
Like 30-bar voicemail. That's
well,
hilarious.
however long, I don't know how long the voicemail was, but I feel like back in the day they used to let you kind of go on. You could kind of
Yeah.
just have as long as you want. So
like the
I didn't really have a lot of voicemails because of that.
Just for
it's
the
the hip
people at
hop
home.
version of the George Costanza
Exactly. I was
bit.
thinking the same thing, but for the
Yeah,
people at
exactly.
home, a verse is typically 16 bars. So he's he's got a 2-verse voicemail
Hey
message.
Jam, do you still have that cassette? We were
Uh,
talking about our first like recordings earlier before you hopped on, and I was mentioning like if we blow up, one day, maybe I'll let some of this old stuff leak so people can just be like, "Oh, check out this old Pike verse from when he was 16."
I definitely don't have that, but I'm pretty sure somewhere on CD, or on my other laptop, I have a recording of like when I first like went into professional studio. So I have some records from like 14, 15, um where the wordplay was always there. Like me, I always like I was because I was so fascinated with words, like I would use like crazy big words, but the flow wasn't on point. But some of the songs, man, like I remember from my first girlfriend ever, I wrote a song for her on Smile by Lloyd Banks. So I got like that on record. I even did my first disc record at like 16, and I recorded that over like a computer. So that definitely the quality was not good. But I definitely got some things in the chamber where people be like, "Oh shit!" Like,
Jam,
you know.
it's really interesting that you say this about wordplay and the words because we're gonna talk about the lyrics on the album a little bit later. But you, I didn't catch this the first time you said it, but on one of the songs you say something about infinite jest, and you
Oh
said, "Yeah,
yeah.
it's that dense," and I was like,
Yes,
"Holy
that dense.
shit!" Because I tried to read that book, and yeah, I didn't finish it. So I tell people like, "This is how you know I'm." pretentious and also stupid because
Yeah.
I tried to read it but I couldn't finish it. Have you read that book? I mean, that's just crazy.
Um. So I didn't read the whole thing. I've definitely read excerpts from it, but also I feel like it's one of those books where like you ever have like how like you have like just like an interview, right? Like you start off with a topic and then it just like creates a bunch of subtopics. So
Yeah,
like that book is just like the epitome of like, oh, you didn't know what this was? Here, let me show you what that was. And then like I don't know, it'd be like writing the longest rap verse of all time and then writing your own anecdotes to that and then the references of all that where it came from.
yeah,
Uh, but I remember like just the idea of David Foster Wallace and like that book was like so big to me, and I was like, damn man, I hope one day I get to like fully read it, but
yeah.
um, I'd
I
rather
totally
watch 10
abandoned it.
episodes of Ozark.
Oh hell yeah! I don't
We
know.
were talking
Just
about that earlier too.
so the just for the people at home, the Infinite Jest has like hundreds of pages of like footnotes or endnotes. So you have to like you're constantly jumping back and forth, and that's part of the experience of reading the book. It's like super fragmented, but it's not easy. It's a
Is that
really
like one
difficult
of
book to
those
read.
build your own adventure books?
Not
If
really. I
if
mean, you
if you want to go in the cave, turn to page 38. If you want to
Nah,
turn
it'd be like if Plato had spark, like if the Plato had like spark notes attached to it. So it'd
yeah,
be like, oh, I'm talking about this subject. If you want to know about it, and they would tell you the page or like I think the anecdote, and then you would go to that page to read about exactly what he's referencing, and then
yeah,
go back to the cycle. So it's, I mean, yeah, I only know like three people that read it in college, like like front to back. Not even, I don't even think my professor that taught me about the book read the whole thing, but
yeah. I mean, it's a great bar because if you know to use it as a reference for like something that's dense is perfect, and you don't hear a lot of rappers referencing literature. And so I didn't when the first time you said I heard it, I was like I didn't even think about it, but then I was like, yeah, he said infinite jest. I was like, holy shit. So you kind of blew my mind with that one.
thanks. Yeah,
I
I'm really a nerd. I'm really a nerd at heart. So
now we're going to talk about the album in a second. I was looking at your Bandcamp the other day because you had some extra tracks for the Bandcamp pre-sale folks. And I saw that you've got 22 releases on Bandcamp, and I was kind of surprised because you're not an old man. That sounds like a lot of releases to me. Are those are those big projects? Do you have some singles in there? What are these 22 other or 21 other projects, I guess?
so most of that is gonna be singles or like I think me and Pike have our like 2-track EP on there too. Um, I mean the crazy thing is I like to I was using Bandcamp, like I didn't really understand Bandcamp till like 2 years ago. To be honest, like I didn't realize how resourceful it was and like how helpful it was for the artists. Like I've had Bandcamp for like at least 5 years, and people always promoted it, but I feel like this new generation of artists, because we're so focused on like independent and like and they started doing the Bandcamp Fridays. I kind of started doing my research on it, and I'm like, yo, Bandcamp is like it's like your own website essentially. Like it's better than like any other funnel that you could get because like your shows, your merch, um, any sort of exclusivity that you're trying to give to your fans, like it's had that for like a while. So I kind of stopped putting singles up there because if I did, I probably would have had like maybe like somewhere in the 75 range
Mm,
of terms of releases, because I made a whole separate band camp for like the singles that I didn't even like when that me and formerly known as DJ Ray Black put out. Um so I kind of focus more now down on the main releases now. So I would
mm-hmm.
say like there's probably like 6 projects and then the rest are singles. I actually have singles on there from like 2013, 14 as well. I might have like hid some of them, but uh there should be some like OG releases on there like that's not on like any sort of platform or anything.
Nice. All right, so Andrew's gonna edit in the link or put it in the description or whatever people do.
Sure.
Check out Jam Young Bandcamp, 22 releases. They're not all albums, so don't be scared. You can listen to all of them. Peep the progression. Um,
Yeah.
and progression is one thing I wanted to talk about because let's talk about the album PB&J Pike Black Jam. It's a uh, clever choice. Um, I guess my first question is this a concept album? Why don't we have let Pike answer this one? Is this a concept album or is it more like a series of songs that you've connected with this theme of PB&J?
Uh, that's a good question. I would say no. It's the overall theme is actually kind of meta. The overall theme is recording an album in Denver, um, and hanging out together.
Yeah,
PB and J didn't come till later. It was actually going to be called the Psychedelic Experience for a long time. We even up into the point that I have alternate artwork that says psychedelic experience on it. And I just, we didn't really get into psychedelics or anything like
I
that.
was gonna ask
Um,
that.
yeah, I didn't think it was quite super trippy, and we didn't do any. And I just thought PB&J was more uh, wholesome, universal, would get more people interested. I from the producer standpoint, I did try and make it cohesive once we landed on that
Yeah,
idea, that theme. That was kind of our hook of it. I thought it
yeah,
was really clever once Jam was like Pike Black and Jam, we're PB and J. I was like,
yeah.
oh, that's awesome.
It
So
works really nicely.
it was definitely an afterthought. Record the songs, make them good, and then oh, that's the name of our group. Let's see if I can kind of tie it in.
It's interesting that you said wholesome, because Jam, I'm listening to more and more of your stuff, and it seems like you you really have a tendency to make kind of like uplifting, positive music, and it's not super like there's not a lot of darkness or negativity. Is that something that you do consciously? Is it just a representation of who you are or what you're feeling? Or tell us about that.
That's a good pun, by the way. It's definitely, I mean, a good representation of what I'm feeling. But I think if anyone listens to like the King's Poet, right? So you asked me about like when I kind of started music. Like for me, I feel like my renaissance started at like 25, right? 25 was like, yo, I have like 700 songs of written material. I have like 200 songs of recorded material. Like, how do I make an album out of this? Right?
Hmm.
How do I make something cohesive and real? And at 23, I went through like a really kind of crazy breakup. And you know how it is when you go through something like you feel like it's traumatic, then it just creates more music. So my first project, The King's Poet, there's like definitely some like uplifting themes and like ideas in there, but a lot of it is kind of like darker. I remember one of my friends being like, "Yo, like the album is good, but like it's mad depressing,"
Hmm.
and
Right.
and I was like, yeah, I'm like, I'm like a lot of sometimes a lot of it is because I was just like in that mind state, and just kind of like rounding out the project, and a lot of the newer tracks were just like real deep, and I still feel that way too. I got a lot of material that's unreleased that's like that, but I think for the most part, knowing where I was at that point, I wish that I had an artist like me to listen to be like, yo, like it's gonna be okay. Like there is a path after this.
Yeah.
Um and it's kind of weird because like in a psycho way, like a reason I started writing poetry is because I actually started like falling in love with like with kind of with like darker themes, right? That's why Eminem was like my favorite artist at first, because a lot of the stuff he was projecting was like very like he was on rock bottom, you know what I mean? So
Right.
I felt like even at 10 that I related to that feeling. And then so knowing that I felt that way, I was like, yo, I gotta kind of like not play both sides, but I gotta find a way to get people to get a way out of that. So
Yeah.
I don't think I do it intentionally. It just kind of happened. Like like I don't know if we're gonna get into this, but "Find My Happiness,"
Oh
like
yeah.
that was like a regular. Everybody was about to fall asleep in the studio except for like me and Mark. And Pike was like, "Yo, let's call it." And then Mark started playing these like keys on it, and I was like, "Hold up!" I was like, "Yo, before we go to bed, I gotta lay this hook down, man. Like I'm just like I gotta get this thing done." And it just turned into I think that's probably one of my favorite and one of the best songs I've ever written.
I agree, and I think like this. You've got another one that's my other favorite, which is on your last release, Growth, which is Made It This Far. And I think those songs are both really similar. They've got kind of this. They're very like inspirational, but they also have a little bit of pain in them, and they're super catchy. The horns go crazy. You're singing and shit. I mean, to me those are like perfect songs. So I thought, like maybe this is Jam's lane, but you're also very versatile. I mean, you did a lot of different stuff on this album. You've got different styles. Like, um, was that a conscious decision? I mean, Andrew went with the beats in particular because you've got some kind of like boom bappy kind of stuff, if you want to use that term, and some kind of trappier stuff. Um, did you want to have that variety on the project?
I did. I don't know if I can't remember if it was a conscious decision. I definitely do like that it was kind of ebbs and flows. Like last song of the night. I can't remember if I specifically said, "Hey, we need a slow song" or not. So I don't know if that's 100% true, but I feel like that was probably the case. Like, hey,
Yeah,
we have these upbeats, we have these boom bap ones, we have these kind of trappy ones. Let's make a chill song to put in here. Um, the Weekend is another departure. That one I don't think was a conscious decision. That one was just going through beats and we got an idea. So that one fit pretty well and it's just like fun and upbeat. So subconscious perhaps
yeah.
decision.
Can we just comment quickly on last song of the night? It is not the last song on the album, right? I mean, because when I
Yeah, that
heard
was
that,
honestly. So I mean, this is the cool thing about being in a group is that you kind of go back and forth between like what's what. Because in my mind, actually, like me and Pike debated on this, but I had "Find Your Happiness" as like the second to last song, and then the last song being the last song of the night. So
yeah,
when I made last song, like the concept to me in my head was I think about having like the best party of your life, right? It's like or a wedding or something like that, right? Like the last song is usually either like super hype or super slow to get people doing it. So when we wanted to go with that route on like the feeling of it, I was like, yo, I want to make a song that's not necessarily a wedding song, but like the song that you're gonna play to finish the night up. Like it's like a nightcap almost. So in my mind, like because remember we did the album in two parts actually, so we did it in like two different trips. So I think we did last song of the night on the first trip, and so
Yeah.
originally like I thought that was gonna be the outro because I thought we were gonna have just like 6 tracks or 7 tracks, whatever we had. Um
now,
yeah, and
I had a conspiracy theory when I heard that. I thought they're setting this up perfectly for their encore. Okay, so you play the last song and then you jump off the stage, and then it's encore, encore, and then you play the rest of the songs. Have you thought
yeah,
about that?
I think as you listen to the album, it definitely plays like that. Because after that, it's like, oh, the way we bring in jobless people, like that energy is like, oh snap. So imagine you
Yeah,
actually do perform this album front to back. You do that song, piano enters, right? Like we do a little bow, exit out, and then you just have people scream, PB&J or Jam Young, whatever. And then it's like, all right, then you hear this beat come back in, like boom, boom, and it just like
yeah,
brings the energy back up here. And then I mean, yeah, I think it worked. I mean, I gotta applaud Pike to that because I think I don't know if that was different my intention, but
yeah,
um I think it worked out really well because then we finish it with the story, and
yeah.
it's perfect.
That was
I
Missed Flights, as you're
I
talking
just
about?
thought it was funny, to be honest. I just thought it was funny to have a song called "Last Song of the Night" not be the last song of the album. I think
It
that was my
it's
motivation.
yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, it threw me off. I'll just say that. But nowadays I don't think people really to albums, front to back like they used to. So in that sense, it's not as important really the order of the tracks.
Yeah,
But
It is to
but
me. I mean, it is to the producers that, like, put it together. I
that's a
mean, I
great point.
definitely did it intentionally, the order.
Yeah,
We debated the order for a while. Um, so that was definitely, intentional. But yeah, I totally understand. I try and turn off shuffle when I listen to a
yeah,
new album because I love, some of my favorite albums. I know the interludes and I know how this song ends and goes into this song. And when it's on shuffle, it does, it doesn't hit you right because
right.
you're so
That's
conditioned to
true,
that.
man. There are some albums that have like these two-song combinations that are like two total bangers, and like
yeah.
uh, that's always super sick. Now, Jam, you mentioned that this was recorded in two parts. So let's talk about like the logistics of the recording process. How did you do it? When did you do it? Where were you guys? How did that all work?
Well, just a quick tidbit, I guess. So, me and Pike met each other online, Facebook, as the song says, and then he came to New York, and I had started getting this traveling bug of like performing in like other cities and states, and I hadn't been to Denver, I don't think, since I hit him up initially in 2013. So I was like, "Yo, I'm not playing no games. So set up a show. Let's figure it out. Get permission from your wife if we can stay there or not, and let's bang this out." So 6 months after we initially first met in person, he was just like, "Yeah, man, let's do it." And at the time, I wanted to bring Ray with me because he was like my partner in crime, and then we just kind of got to work. Like it was exciting. As I said in like in another interview, like it was like the first time that like I could like wake up or roll over and like have like a full disposal of studio, but also have like great minds next to me. You know what I'm saying? Like I know I trust my senses of making music, but it's also like the feeling of collaborating with people is like one of the feeling that I really thrive on. And it was the first time where we had like 4 consecutive days to really do that. And it was like, yo, we're about to have a jam packed like 4 day trip. Let's make the best of it. So, when we weren't practicing or like we had some fun, like we went to a couple breweries and stuff. Like that's something that I'm really into. But for the most part, I feel like we were just like, yo, if we're gonna drink and have fun, like let's do this shit in the studio and let's make these records. Like let's see what comes out of it. So recording wise, I don't even know what the first song we did was. Pike, do you remember what the first song we recorded?
I
Uh,
heard I heard a version of For Granted
Probably
years
for
and years and
granted.
years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think maybe that was the first one because Pike found the sample and then Ray made the drums and it was just like I remember being like because so I've been I'm still evolving as an MC and learning a lot of different techniques, but something that Ray had told me about was like the callback, right? And it's like it's not even about like what you're saying per se, it's about just like how you're saying it. Like that's why the first line of the album is really like, "Yo, Pike, we out like Black, we out in Denver. Pike, Black, we out in Denver. Like, yo, we like capture this moment with me for a second. Like,
Yeah,
take this in because this is the beginning of something epic. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I know something's gonna happen. So like, because I typically don't really like, when if I do the same rhyme scheme, it's usually on some like Jay-Z, like businessman type of flow. But this was like, nah, just being direct. Like we were starting you an album. We started it in Denver. I can't believe that we made it to Denver. Like I manifested this, right? Like that whole line is just about manifesting. Um, and I'm like, yo, we're just gonna have fun with it. So I think we started
yeah,
from there, and then the project just we just started. Pike had a library of beats that he hadn't used, and it was like, yo, let's sift through this and see what other concepts we can make. Um, so that was the first half of it, and then I don't think we knew. and Pike can obviously talk about this, but like once we made like 3 or 4 songs, we're like, all right, we got something solid and like an EP. I don't think we knew it was gonna be an album until the second time, because I was
Mm.
like, yo, we're gonna come back, do another show, and like let's finish this out, like round it out. Um, and we had been communicating over online, so we pretty much like sharpened all the edges on it and was like, all right, this is what we're gonna do now. We're gonna make a project. I didn't even really think it was an album until we finished the recordings of the second time, because I was like, yo, I think we just finished. Actually, I realized that when I wrote Miss Flights. I was like, yo, we finished our first album. Yeah, that's what we did. Like it was like a real like realization moment, and I'm like, oh snap. Like I always dreamed of making an album, and it was happening without me realizing it was happening. That
Yeah.
was
So so this was all recorded in person together. There was no sending stuff back and forth online. None of that. I didn't know that. I actually thought that you had sent some stuff back and forth. So that's really cool. All together in the studio, because a lot of music nowadays, of course, is made. Producers sending beats, writing verses. People make projects without even being in the same room. So like,
Which we did a lot. Like Jam said, we met in 2013. I don't know how many songs we did before we met in person. But we have a ton of music. Even some of the bonus tracks on the Bandcamp were done like that. But everything on the 11 track thing, all of the beats, outside of maybe 2 or 3 that I had done before they got here, all of the beats we made together, all of the raps we wrote and recorded here.
that's sweet. So tell me about the workflow, because when you're in a studio with, 3 people, um, you got to take turns. You know, how did that work? I mean, were you collabing with Ray on these beats? Jam, were you involved with the beats at all, or were you just writing? Like, what was that workflow like?
Stam. I mean, I have. It's funny. You guys were talking about NPC. So at this time, I just actually started like um learning how to use it really well. Like I wouldn't say really well. So I felt like I definitely had some like notes and like production wise, like how things were created, but I didn't physically touch. I don't think I physically touched anything.
Hmm.
But it was dope to see like Pike and Ray work together. Because it was like Ray at the time was like he's very intuitive, and he also likes to just learn new programs. So when like we were messing with Ableton and messing with samples and stuff, like he was like, "All right, bet I'm gonna do this." At one point, actually, when Pike was making a beat, Ray was making beats on the couch. Like
Hmm.
they were both making beats, and actually, it was kind of funny because me and him, I don't think you knew this, Pike, but some of the beats he made in Denver while we were working on the album, all together in the same room, I ended up using for like a couple singles. So it was yeah, the workflow was crazy because it was just like I feel like it was like whatever Dreamville did, when they had like 87 artists come in and they had like 6 studios. It was like the really the poor man's version of that, because we
Yeah,
were all like, if I was writing to a beat, then Pike was making something new, Ray was working on something, or like like, even if we work on the same song, it was great. But if sometimes we were just all working on something different,
yeah.
and I think that was like a beautiful moment.
I
But I
mean, it
think
clearly, sorry, it clearly like worked very well. Album sounds really good. Um, but it's not easy to collaborate, especially on beats. So, and I know you guys, I know you said there was one, I think it was Missed Flights, where, I think Ray did the verse and you did the hook. Andrew, is that true? Did
Yeah,
you?
that was actually was that your second trip? They missed their
yeah.
flight, and that hence the name of the song. So I was all set up. I had all the liquor and the weed and their beds made and everything. I'm like, yes, I'm so excited. And they're like,
Yeah,
oh, we missed the flight. And I was like, oh, all right. I guess I'm gonna make beats all night. And
it's
so I made
fun
a
time.
couple beats that night, and yeah, we ended up. I don't know whose idea it was, but I flipped a sample and made a beat, and I think Ray really liked it and wanted to resample it. So he took. I don't know if he took my chops or if he took the same sample that I used, and then he actually did it in his program on the MPC program, and then sent me back the stems. And then once I had that all the pieces together, then I kind of put together the like format of here's my beat, here's how we're gonna transition, and then here's Ray's. And then Jam came up with a really cool concept um, for the lyrics to
Yeah,
kind of went with how we made it.
I
Yeah,
agree.
what
That
was actually
concept is sweet.
kind of crazy because I feel like I remember because you that was so the beat. Did we write that song before Talib came into the studio?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was when he came over and we did that freestyle that
Yeah,
got
yeah,
in the world. He that was one of them that I put in the cipher.
yeah. I remember that. So it was crazy because I don't know. I'm pretty sure I had the idea of like splitting it because of what we did with like For Granted, which was our first song. We had they made the beat together, and then Ray had this program called Halftime. So I was like, yo, see what the I just like was we meet Pike wrote his verse, I wrote my verse, and I'm like, nah, I feel like it needs like some crazy like ending to it. So I was like, yo, Ray, put the beat on Halftime. Like, let me just see what it sounds like. And then when it went slow, I just went ballistic, and I was like, yo, give me like 10 minutes, and I just wrote that whole thing. So I feel like I remember like that the Miss Flights was kind of like the same thing where it was like I heard this beat and I heard like I was like, yo, maybe you should flip it. And then like instead of being like one part Pike, one part Ray, I was like, yo, let's do the intro. Like this part is perfect for this. Cause I had made Talib. That was the only thing that actually was like manufactured. It was like I told Talib after we met, I'm like, yo, I got this super dope concept. I'm like, I think you should like tell the story of how you met us. And I'm like, I think it would work dope, especially because me and him we hit it off like after like 20 minutes, it was just bananas. And I was like, yo, send me this voicemail. I'm like, I need this shit ASAP. I'm not leaving Denver until I get this voice note. So he sent it to me, and then I remembered like that slow breakdown on Pike's beat, and I was like, "Yo, let's do that." And then it just we weren't sure. We tried like the way to chop it up like that was kind of crazy because we didn't really know how to put two different beats on two almost like two different tempos like together. And then we just finesse it, like through just ear and just
Yeah,
listening to it over and over. The only thing I'm sad about, I kind of wish that people knew why it was called Missed Flights because we actually almost missed our flight twice. So the first time I've only missed like two flights in my entire life. So I worked in the morning and I've done it before where I just take an Uber straight to the airport and like LaGuardia is like quick and whatever. But this was Mother's Day weekend. So I didn't even think about like the traffic and like, I kept looking on my phone like, oh, we're gonna be fine, we're gonna be fine. And by the time that we took a Uber, we got into the car, it took us like double the time it said it was going to on the app, essentially. So we got there and like the plane had by the time we got through, the whole plane scrapped. And that was the last flight to Denver that day. So they rebooked us the next morning, like super early at like 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock at JFK. So I was like, yo, let's just go home. Like, let's make songs and just like go to sleep early and wake up and go. But the JFK to go from like the city to JFK is like wild. So we took that and then they had to make us take a shuttle bus. So it was like some whole other thing too. So we were like 10 minutes away from the doors closing again. And I was like, yo, if we missed it, I was so anxious. I was like, if we miss this flight again, I'm gonna flip. But
it's,
it
it's
all,
the worst
it all
feeling.
worked out.
Man, and
Yeah.
that song turned out really good, and it's crazy for me to say this, but that Talib part, the beat during that breakdown or the hook or whatever you call that, I think that's my favorite beat on the album. That I don't know why, man, but I'd love that. Every time I hear it, I'm like, ooh, ooh, ooh. some like
Yeah,
rock varsity
I
shit.
think I had intentions of rapping on that, or I mean, I still might rap on it, but
You gotta do something with that. Send it to
Yeah,
me.
I still have the audio from
Yeah.
what Talib was talking about. We did this freestyle. I still have the audio from it. The guy that came and shot the video, moved like shortly after and lost his SD card with all the footage.
Hmm.
So it
yeah,
doesn't exist. I do have the audio of it. I should go check that out. But yeah, so that was one of the beats. That version, that hook version, was my version of Missed Flights, and
Yeah.
so you guys both rapped on it.
Is it
yeah.
true that you freestyled for 30 minutes and you could have freestyled for 2 hours?
So honestly, what's crazy is, I mean, I wouldn't say like freestyle is like my strong suit, but when I get comfortable, especially if I'm like high or a little drunk, sometimes, I feel like I just stop overthinking shit. Like I
Yeah.
think freestyle is hard when you're an overthinker because you're like always like, yo, what's my next bar? Am I gonna say this? Am I gonna do that? So at that time, it was like when Pike told me that Talib was coming over, I wasn't sure what was even going to happen. Like I was like, wait, what? And Ray was kind of like, yo, you got this, relax. Like it's gonna be, y'all gonna freestyle once or twice, and whatever happens, happens. Because I had done a cipher, like a couple months before that, and like I just my headspace wasn't in it, and when I came off stage, I was like, oh man, that was rough. Um, so when
It's
he
hard.
came there, yeah, when he came there, I was like, "Yo, I'm gonna make sure that I keep my headspace in, and I just let it flow." You know what I'm saying? Whatever happens, happens, because that's what freestyle's about. But I was like, "I'm
Yeah.
gonna let it flow," and I think Talib, because he was such a good freestyler, he was already, and he had done this previous times. Like in his mind, I think he was just like, "Yo, we about to go to some other's crib, like, and just smoke them." Right? Like he just came in with them that entirety. And I think when he walked into the room, we were working on a song, and he already felt like, "Oh, damn, like this is like I wasn't expected to walk into this
Yeah.
environment. Like I thought it was gonna be like everyone just chilling and smoking, and like we would start up already, but nah, like the energy was, like he said, the energy was crazy. And then Pike, I didn't even realize Pike had those 5 beats. So when we start free, when I don't even remember who went first. I think I went first just to like set it off. Um, but it was just like it just kind of felt like it felt like we were making songs, like we were just like we were freestyling, having fun, and making songs together. Like that's how it kind of jumped in, because I was very like into creating hooks, like as to kind of start off my freestyle. So when I started freestyling, I kind of like started making like fake hooks on these beats to lead him in,
Yeah.
and then it just goes back and forth. So yeah, I mean, if he had another 30 minutes of beats queued up, I mean, I don't. I'm a very big energy person, and I go with the flow really well. So if he had, who knows, man? Like me and Talib were ready to scrap, like just ignore the PB and J for a second and just make a whole EP right there. To be honest,
Yeah. Well, he definitely. I mean, I like his part on that song. It's a really
he could
cool
rap.
energy,
He could rap though, man. Like
and
You did a
he
really good
definitely
job.
seemed impressed by like what you were saying, that you guys were taking it seriously and that you were actually like doing some real work. So that's always super cool. We used to freestyle all the time, and it's hard. It's not
It's
easy.
hard. We were
People just
reminiscing about it recently. A friend of mine from high school, Jake B. Nimble, shout out.
shout out Jake.
Uh, he bought our album, and he's like, "Hey, remember how we used to make all this music back in high school? Do you still have any of it?" And luckily, it was all saved under his name, so I knew what hard drive I had all of our old music on, and I found it and was listening to some of the stuff I haven't listened to in like 10 years. Like we were actually, I mean, the recording was terrible, but
Yeah,
we're actually decent
I could.
freestylers, but
Yeah,
way back in the day.
you know, we were talking about the beats because Andrew, you and I, when we used to beats, we would take turns. So like one person do one, next person hopefully does another thing, and you don't just change
Delete
change what
it.
the other person did. Were you doing that with Ray at all?
Uh, yeah. When we were talking about like the whole recording process, the I with the lyrics and the beats especially, it was very kind of round robin. If somebody had an idea, you
Yeah.
would just go, okay, have the seat or come up to the mic. Let's lay it down. And I
Yeah.
think that was the great thing about doing it here in my house versus a recording studio. I don't know, we only have an hour. Is that what we want to do? Like when we were doing it here and there's no time limit, it's like, yeah, lay it down. Let's see if we like it. I think with the beats, outside of those two missed flights and for granted, where I like physically, here's the sample, you go sit on the couch with your software and do it, and then send me back the stems. Most of the other ones, I think those were more verbal collaborations, just because you didn't know Ableton.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more, what do you think here? And add a snare there, try this. And I think there were probably certain times where he knew enough to draw in the hi-hats or play an 808 once we picked the sound. Once I helped him, what do you think of this? Yeah, that's cool. Okay, here's the keyboard. So I think he did that a lot. I Yeah, it's just like driving the Ableton. I don't think he really
Yeah.
sat down and did it.
Right.
That was more of a, "Hey, can you put this thing here for me?"
Sure. I kind of want to. I want to obviously talk about the writing on the album and the production. So I'm gonna go back and forth a little bit. Um, some interesting lyrics on this album. Jam. Is it true that you get more ass than colonoscopies?
So yo, when I that line has been mentioned to me. I mean, especially on the intro of an album to say that. And I performed that song a hell of a amount of times. So I think it's just like one of those lines. I think it's very much like a Kanye line.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
it's just like one of those things where like because everything else was just so like smooth and like manifesting, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
if we're gonna end this out, if we're gonna end this song that's so fucking dope, like I need to gloat like I'm the goat. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
um I mean, in my lifetime, I've definitely been there's no shortage of culo, as my
Oh
people
yeah.
say,
I'm
in my
I'm glad you
lifetime.
mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that because there's also a handful of Spanish drizzled in. Even Andrew on one of the extra tracks or singles, you said
Yeah,
"Life's a
yeah.
bitch." I'm gonna make her say "I papi." I was like, oh, okay, okay, because I live in Mexico, so Spanish is a big part of my life. Are you like fully bilingual, or what's your background with the language?
I would say I never checked the box bilingual because I don't know the conjugations of Spanish have always been like kind of lost to me.
Yeah,
So like I always think about it like when someone in America is like can't really like you can get their point, you can understand what they're trying to say, even though they're not saying it correctly per se.
yeah,
That's how I kind of speak Spanish. Where like I know a lot of the words, but because I don't use it on a daily basis, it kind of gets like a little lost, and my brain's like it's kind of like freestyling. My mind's like, wait, what word is this again? And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
okay, this is how you do it. But I feel like when it comes to like songwriting, I mean, Spanish is like I wouldn't say it's one of the easiest things to rhyme to, but a lot of the words um end in like a or like have very like similar inflections. So I feel like writing in Spanish is actually not that difficult if you know how to say what you're trying to say. You know,
yeah,
rap is very slangy, so because it's like slang, like you can rap in Spanish and slang too. So
yeah,
um, but honestly, in 20 what was that 2018 2018, I really started kind of like wanting to get in tune more. I mean, I felt like actually Spanish music in general kind of blew up again, right? Like the Spanish trap and all that stuff. But I don't think I was
yeah,
intentional. I was just like I part of the reason why I grew out my hair and kind of look because I wanted to really embrace like the Latin side of my hair of me
yeah.
essentially. So I'd always try to like throw those kind of references in it.
Not to like jump your questionnaire. Aaron sent us a kind of ideas of some questions. But one of them was just like what's changed during the process, and there are a couple lines, and that made sense in 2018, and now in 2022 are dated. Um, so it's kind of like
Yeah.
that because it is a long process. That's just what happens when you work on an album for
Yeah, why don't you talk more about that? Because you started this in 2018. I remember hearing a lot of these beats in their, first
infancy.
draft form,
Yeah.
and a lot has changed. Everything sounds way better, obviously, after you mix and master it, of course. But, you also added a lot of bells and whistles and some outros. The first two tracks have outros. And how did those tracks that you made 4 years ago evolve to what they are now?
Um, I would say, what we were doing in the studio with limited time was get down the bones of the song. So there's a couple songs that are relatively short as far as like what we actually recorded. Because Jam only did one, I think Roll Up is only like one verse, right? So there are a
Yeah,
couple
it's just
songs
one
that are
verse.
like one verse, two verses, and then all right, that's a cool idea. That's a cool concept for a song. Let's now that we have that down, let's go do the next one. And maybe you just did the verse and your dubs, and I didn't mix it because we were trying to, crank out as much as we could in the 2 weeks. Even over those two trips, you're probably only here for what, like 8 days, 9 days. They're short
Yeah, probably
trips.
9 days max. I think the first trip was 5, and the next day was like 4. It would have been
So
4. It would have been 5, but
yeah. So I just wanted to get down the basics of it. And then I kind of thought, as the producer, executive producer, whatever, that I'll find a way to flesh these out. Whether it's we're going to get features, which, we kind of talked about for a while, like, oh, maybe we should have this person try and give us a verse for this. And when either we couldn't decide or that didn't fit, then it was I kind of wanted to stretch out some of the songs, add more sections. I was very not anti 316, but I just wanted to get away from that formula as much as possible. So I think there's only like one song that's three verses, 316 bar verses on this whole album. Because I just want to do outros and bridges and interludes like as much as possible.
That's interesting that you say that. I know Jam. You've got one verse on some song. I don't even know if it's on this project, but you start a third verse and you say third verse. I know it's
Whiskey.
kind of. Would you say it's risky?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's on whiskey. Yeah.
That's an interesting comment. So what is that about? I think third verses are people aren't interested in them anymore. It's too long.
Um, on like mainstream songs, people aren't interested unless you do it in that under 3 minute timestamp.
Yeah.
Like what I don't know if the baby's still like cancer or whatever, but one of my favorite songs by him is called "Ball If You Want It," "Ball If You Want To," and
Okay.
he has 3 verses in that, and the song is 2.5 minutes. He
That's
starts
crazy.
off, he likes to come in right away, and obviously his rapid flow. So he does like 16 bars hook, 16 bars hook, 16 bars, and then it just ends. And it was like I just like when we were writing together, um, Pike came in on the second verse, and then I was like, I don't know, the bars are actually like 8 bar verses, so it fit in that time. But I was just like, I don't know, the whiskey concept. Like I feel like I could have wrote like 6 more verses. You know what I mean? Because it was just so easy. It's such a fun, easy song to create that it was like, damn, there's so many things you could do with whiskey, right? And that's the problem with like being a creative. You're like, how do I think that's the genius and the hard part of being creative is that you have to condense down things
Yeah.
and make it. And I thought it was I thought it was just a funny line to be like, like the song could have ended after the hook after Pike's verse, and I was like, nah, like I'm so drunk that I'm gonna write a third verse, and I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna let you know that I know that I'm taking a risk by doing it,
Yeah.
but fuck it.
Now that song is not on the album. That's one of the. Is that one
the
of the
bonus track.
singles, or where can people listen to that one?
It's
Can
on
they?
it's on Bandcamp. It's on the Bandcamp version of PB&J, but it's on Spotify and all the DSPs. I probably will release it again like as a on Bandcamp because it's actually one of I think it's one of my I think it's one of the most fun songs I've ever made.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Definitely with
fun song.
Pike, but just like I feel like it's one of those songs where like people are gonna listen to it back and be like, "Yo, this song is actually like really dope," you know, like um
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was
Um,
part of our rollout. So we probably didn't put as much effort into, hey, we got a new song. It was, well, Jam's doing a song a week. He wants to do a song a week this year. So that was part of, um, since this album was pretty much done in 2019, we've been making music since then. So we've been sitting on it, but we wanted to kind of close the loop of here's the album. We're done with this. Everything we do afterwards, let's find a home for it. So we dropped like 3 singles before we released the album.
Yeah.
So if you're not following Jam on Spotify or anything, you probably missed them. So we'll put those back out. But yeah,
Jam Young
Jam
at
Young Music.
Jam Young Spotify dot
And
Well,
net.
I would say
whiskey's
the
a thing, man. I
yeah,
don't know. I need country to get on that. I need people like pop music to get on it because that's a record that like I could see blowing up on TikTok in like six
Yeah.
months. You know what I'm saying? Like everyone that's
Um,
down drinking whiskey for the summertime, like
oh
so.
yeah,
I'm looking
drinking
forward
with
to performing that with Andrew and without him because I think people are gonna be so like, what? This just came out of left field.
yeah. You mentioned this idea of a concept, right? That song has a concept, and I think every song on the album has a concept, and that's interesting to me because when Andrew and I used to make music together, our concept was always we're good at rapping. So that it was just rap good, talk shit, make crazy metaphors. Um, but you do a really good job of songwriting. This is one thing that has really impressed me, Jam. And I've seen, you know, the progression. You're super good at writing songs, and you also mentioned like you do have to kind of simplify things. A lot of rappers also think I have to be the most complicated. I have to be the most technical, and we've worked with rappers who can't even record their lyrics in the studio. They're so complicated they can't even rap them. So I think you do a really good job of that, kind of keeping things you know simple. I mean, in a very good way. But is this your mentality when you go into writing songs, or do you also sometimes just write songs to talk shit? Because I mean,
Yeah,
you gotta do
well,
that at some point.
actually, so what's funny is so one of my personal like friends, and he's like I think he's one of the best technical rappers I know. His name is Quest, right? We're both Aries, and he's like one of the best concept people that I know. And what's crazy is he'll like to me, I feel like I'm very much like J. Cole concept wise. Like I have an idea, right? I don't go like too in depth in it, but I definitely make sure you know that like this is my idea behind what's going on.
Hmm.
Where like other people, like you have those like more intricate minds like Kendrick, right? Like he won't even let you know what the song is about until like the 7 minute epilogue of what you heard, right? And I
Yeah,
think that I like that, and I have written like a few songs like that. But I think in terms of just like digesting music for like your average listener, like it's definitely I think that's why people think of Cole as like a man of the people is because he gives you something that's like is digestible almost at all times. And so when I go into like songwriting, like it's hard because the young person in me is that dude of like, oh, yo, I want to fucking rhyme 7 times here, and I want to like put these technical things, and I almost get like jealous sometimes when I like people's music because I'm like, damn, like I could do that, like you know what I mean, like I want to like that. But I think when it comes, I just kind of I think you gotta as an artist, the biggest key is just like don't think too much, like just don't think too much, like I think making music people make it like a lot harder than it is. And I think for some people it actually is hard. You know what I'm saying? Like some people need to take 2 year breaks and make that music. But I think I just love making it so much that I'm like I don't mind dealing with the consequences of someone being like, "Oh, that's not rap enough." Because
Yeah.
I know that I can do it, so I'm not really like discouraged. And actually, I don't know if you heard "No Brainer" that came out last week, but
I love
like
that
that
song. That
song,
shit's dope.
yeah, that song was like, yo, I found a sample on my computer on my MPC, and I was like, yo, I need somebody. I just like went crazy. I was like, yo, people, I think people forget that I can rap. So I'm like, all right, let's show them that no matter what version of jam you get in, it's a no brainer. Like
Yeah.
it is what it is. So Pike added like the finesse on the beat, and I was like, like
Yeah.
I
No,
just
I
don't.
think
I think people need to make good music, man. Like,
for
forget
sure. I think
sometimes it's too complicated.
yeah, and I think you definitely have shown your versatility. I mean, you also sing a lot on a lot of these songs. I wanted to ask you guys who has because I think Pike, are you doing the auto tune on the hook on Moon Rocks? Is that you?
No, that was Ray. That
Okay.
was through like an auto tune pedal
Yeah,
I have.
I couldn't figure that out, but I was gonna ask you who has the better singing voice, but I guess Andrew, you did not sing on the album.
No, I can't. I can't sing.
Oh, come on.
It's
Well,
jam.
Jam, you really go for it. Tell me about because you sing on a lot of songs, and I really like you do this, you come up with these melodies. I assume that you are writing these melodies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So I think it goes back to back to the reference no brainer. Like the first line is like, I'm not just a rapper, I'm an entertainer, right? And I think that's something that like when you're in the underground, right? You grow up in this like boom bap world. Like they don't like that shit. They don't like they want to be entertained, but only to the certain extent that they want to be entertained.
yeah,
And then if you rap too hard, then you're like segregating yourself from like people that are listening. So it's like I always like struggle with this internally because I'm like, how do I find the right balance for it? But like the entertaining part is like that's what rap is like on its biggest surface, right? Like when it started, as cool as it was to come up with all these like bars and punchlines and stuff. It was like a lot of people's voices. Like Rakim, the reason why Rakim is so dope, like it's just his inflection, his melody of how he says it. Like fish, that is my favorite dish. Like that's not a bar. Like that's not like, but it's like the way he says it, it's just so
yeah,
cool, you know. And I think that when it comes to music, like I didn't fall in love with rap at first. I fell in love with music. So when I hear things like the last song of the night, you
yeah,
know, like I'm still learning how to use my voice and like where my tone is in terms of like actual singing.
yeah,
And auto tune actually, I use auto tune not as a crutch, but as a way to like hear if I'm on pitch.
right,
I'm just using that to be like, oh, I can sing like this. Like I
yeah,
can pull this off if I stay in this key right here. So the melodies to me is just what makes a song, right? Like a singer could rap. Like I think about that all the time. Like I'm like, yo, a singer could out rap me. Just if they stop doing melodies and harmonies and shit, like they could probably do the same thing I'm doing. So like
yeah,
how do you make it different? How do you make it like really good? And I think a lot of the hardcore rappers, like even like Benny the Butcher and Griselda, they're starting to realize like if they want to take their fan base to the next level, like they gotta put those melodies in.
right,
They gotta put these singers and these things, and I don't know, it wouldn't be music without melody, right?
right,
Like you can't make a beat without melody. So as cool as it is to rhyme, like you need
yeah.
that shit.
I'm really impressed because you're not like a singer first and foremost. You're not like fucking D'Angelo hitting the shit, but you do your thing and it's super catchy. Like all these songs, your hooks are always super catchy, and I think that's what gives them that potential. That's why you listen to something like "Find Your Happiness" or "Made It This Far," and it's like, wow, these could be really successful songs. I think first and foremost because they're catchy. So impressive work, young man. Just going back to the actual topic for a song versus just talking shit. Andrew, like, what was that like for you writing? Because you haven't really been a rapper per se for a while, and I haven't written raps in a long time. It would take me a long time to write raps if I, you know that I've tried to
Yeah.
write a verse for years. I've got 8 bars written in the last 10 years. Um, was it like easier for you to write to these songs because they had a coherent theme or topic?
It always is like we were talking about whiskey. We did that in one night. I probably knocked out my verse pretty quickly. There's it comes and goes. When we were on tour, when we were in Detroit, that verse, those songs haven't come out yet, but one of those verses that took me a long time. I had to go like sit in another room by myself because I'm trying to, Jam and Ray, they're super quick with it. Like I said, it's like, riding a bike, flexing that muscle.
Yeah,
You gotta stick with it. Like I can make beats really quick now, but yeah, when it comes back to writing a verse, it does take some time, but it was definitely uh like inspiring to keep up with Jam. And when
yeah,
you're in that environment and he's writing his verse and you hear the hook and you hear his verse and it's like, all right, I want to take this next one.
yeah,
So I think I did that a couple times, like, Bad Boy, that had a cool concept. Is like, all right, let me just make as many Puff Daddy notorious references
yeah,
as I can. That was a pretty easy verse to write. Even for Granted, that kind of had a topic outside of I'm really good at rapping.
yeah,
Um, so those, yeah, actually, all the songs like have solid hooks and themes, and that definitely is super helpful.
yeah. I think it is on some keywords and write around them. Uh,
Mhm.
Kind of build, like, start with the punchline and then kind of create it. Man, Bad Boy 97, that is a fucking banger. It's For me, it's between that one and Find Your Happiness. Those are probably my two favorites on the album, and they're so different. I mean, typically I like more like aggressive, hard stuff like Bad Boy 97, but man, Find Your Happiness, that's just so catchy. Um, but I
Actually,
love
but
that.
you mind if I just want to applaud Pike, man, because like the guest feature. I don't want to say it was a guest feature, but like when you do feature on someone like someone else's track, even though we were all collaborating, I think it's like one of those like as a writer, it's like a really like pressured but also like exciting moment because like you get to really like shine. And the one thing I like about collaborating when Pike raps is like I feel like like the verses are like A1. You know what I'm saying? Like they come out really really well because he has a moment to like it's like the spotlight almost comes on him, you know, and that's why like for Granted verse, like he has some of my favorite bars on the album. You know what I mean? I'm only leaving the lab when I get more pizza. Like it's so simple, but like I love that shit because it's relatable. It's like ill, you know.
Oh my god.
But that's why
I
I couldn't let
actually,
him, I couldn't let Pike get the last verse on that song either. So
Yeah.
I just
I'm
well,
out the game, but I still drop buckets from the bleachers. That's very I don't really
I
rap anymore, but if I have to rap, I'm a sink it.
I'm not surprised because I've seen you for 15 years doing this, so I expected that. Although I will say this, Andrew, because you haven't been rapping that much. Um, I was impressed. You did a really nice job.
Thank you.
You send me your verses pretty much every time you write something, and
Yeah,
I'm super nitpicky. So
critical.
I really don't have any nits to pick on this one. And the whole project sounds super good. Who mastered it? Who's the masterer?
Oh yeah, of course. I gotta shout out my guy Jake Palumbo. If you don't know Jake, he's also an incredible producer. If you like boom bap and like
Yeah,
funky stuff, you gotta check out his album with Elder Sensei. He produced the whole thing, and it's so hip hop and funky, like it's amazing. But Jake, also an incredible rapper too. He dropped a new album called Plant Based Libtard. He's a plant-based eater, so he's hilarious. If you like hilarious rap, man,
Yeah.
dude, this dude from a technical standpoint, the way that Jake rhymes is incredible. But his I don't even know if it's his favorite thing to do, but engineering is like this man's like skill, man. I had been I've been in like the what do you call it? The queue to get him to start mixing my shit. And when I finally got a chance to like work with him on kind of a consistent basis, he's been any record that you hear from Jam Young, 95% of them from 2018 and on has been mixed and mastered by Jake Palumbo and Space Labs. He's talking about Space Lab Studios in Ridgewood. Um, he's done albums for like Beat Miners, and a bunch
He mixed
of
he mixed some Nas too. I
yeah,
was gonna say I'd like to get him on the show eventually, one of our guests, because
Oh yeah.
yeah, he's
producer,
incredible.
engineer, I definitely I told him after he mastered it and sent it back, it's like I want to pick your brain because this sounds
So
awesome.
good.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, because I heard, I heard For Granted, I heard Bad Boy '97, like the original versions, and they weren't bad, but like, man, because a song like Bad Boy '97, it's really bare bones. You've got a kick, a snare, an 808, a couple little stabs,
One little sound, yeah.
but man, it turned out so fire. So, shout out Jake, you killed it, man. Good job.
Hell yeah, that's my guy right there.
Well, shall we wrap it up with 42D?
Yeah, that was awesome. That was our first episode of chopping it up with 42D, perhaps.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jam, for stopping by and chatting with
Absolutely.
us. That was really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thanks for
We'll
listening.
do this on a not a regular basis, I'm sure.
No, not anywhere
But
near regular, but
yeah,
hopefully more.